calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers. Earlier today, I spoke about an ongoing investigation. We do not know the motive of the shooter yet. We don't know his opinions or affiliations. We don't know whether he had help or support or if he communicated with anyone else. Law enforcement professionals, as I speak, are investigating those questions. Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America. We've traveled it before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer, whether it's with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. I've said it many times that the choice in this election we make in this election is going to shape the future of America and the world for decades to come. I believe that with all my soul. I know that millions of my fellow Americans believe it as well. And some have a different view as to the direction our country should take. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, and God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face a time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend into violence. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of a would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully, not through acts of violence. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. So tonight, I'm asking every American to recommit, to think about it. What's made America so special? Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of all goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created democracy that gave reason and balance a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
You've just been listening to President Biden at the Oval Office talking about how violence has never been the answer, that they must resolve the differences at the ballot box and not with bullets. Let's bring back Bloomberg Balance of Power co-anchor Joe Matthew, who's joining us from Milwaukee, where the Republican National Convention is being held this week. Joe, we just heard the president sounding very reasonable, logical, really asking for unity and no further violence. How will this resonate with the American public?
Well, let's see. As we mentioned earlier, this is not a venue that Joe Biden has used very often, and he's typically not in Americans' living rooms at this hour in prime time here, at least on the East Coast in the United States. He said things very simply. He only spoke for about 7 minutes, and we do need to bring ourselves back to the facts. We don't actually have that many of them following what occurred yesterday in Pennsylvania, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Joe Biden just said, reminding us of the moment. A former president has been shot. An American citizen was killed. He invoked Nancy Pelosi's husband. He invoked Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, the kidnapping plot that was foiled against her. January 6th, the composite of political violence that for some has been normalized in this country. And he said the political rhetoric has gotten very heated. We need to cool it down. Whether people listen to Joe Biden or not, that is a consistent message for him, and he says he'll be on the road this week as the Republican National Convention gets underway here in Milwaukee. And as Joe Biden just told Americans, they will surely be criticizing his record. The idea here is that we do so peacefully.
Exactly to your point, Joe, how do you tone down the rhetoric and the concerns? Because we're seeing people that are being polled that are actually expecting the reverse, that we could see further political violence ahead.
That's right. That's right. And this remains a distinct possibility. This is why we're trying very concertedly at Bloomberg to not be projecting or predicting. The fact of the matter is, we saw some very powerful images yesterday of Donald Trump, blood streaming down his face, his fist in the air. And before he left the stage, he said, fight, fight, fight. There are a lot of angry people in America right now, and there might be a sense that retribution, some sort of reaction should follow in this particular case. That is what the Secret Service and the FBI are trying right now to prevent. But the fact is, you're right. Our own polling has borne this out, that Americans are deeply concerned about political violence surrounding this campaign and surrounding the election itself in November. It will be incumbent upon both of these men, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, to lower the temperature and keep that from happening. One will not be able to do it alone.
And Joe, of course, you're in Milwaukee because of the Republican National Convention. How will the events over the weekend and what's transpired in the last 24 hours or so affect this gathering?
It's a great question. We have seen some hardening of the security perimeter. There's just an enormous level of security here, law enforcement, thousands of law enforcement from 40 different agencies. And there has been talk of expanding the perimeter a bit. The question we have is about messaging. Speeches are being rewritten right now. The program is being reset for what's a 4-day event culminating in the nomination and the nominating speech of Donald Trump on Thursday night. We have yet to learn who his running mate will be. That is something that will likely be told in the next 24 hours or so. But I'll be very curious to hear what calls for unity we hear from Donald Trump any additions or subtractions from the speaker schedule, and what the rank and file think. There are 50,000 people here in Milwaukee to take part in this exercise. Many delegates have traveled from around the country to take part in this, and we like to think that it will resolve into a message of unity and positive action. We'll have 4 days to figure that out, and we'll have special coverage here from Milwaukee as we learn together on Bloomberg.
Joe, do you think that this is the moment that sort of galvanizes or forces the decision of independents or undecided voters?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. Again, hard to tell. It was interesting to see the snap endorsements following the shooting yesterday from the likes of Elon Musk and Bill Ackman, and you wonder if that was representative of a certain demographic of Americans here, fence sitters, as you said, undecided voters. We also have something in this country called double haters. That's what the pollsters like to call them, who don't want any part of Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And I'll be very curious to see what happens to that number. That's about 10% that these two men are fighting over here. In critical swing states, only 6 or 7 of them that will decide this election. That is really how narrow this is. And when you have such powerful optics as we saw yesterday, following the potency of age and the questions of mental acuity surrounding Joe Biden, there is so much noise right now that it's very difficult to answer these questions. And that's why our coverage here in Milwaukee is going to be so important.
And of course, we still have about 4 months towards the U.S. election, and so many things could change during that time. Joe Matthew in Milwaukee, our Bloomberg Balance of Power co-anchor covering the Republican National Convention. And we're getting the first market reactions in the Asia trading session, mostly in the currency spaces. We're seeing a little bit of a boost for the U.S. greenback. But take a look at the open in the Kospi Kosdaq in South Korea, because we're seeing the downside pressure on the Korean won already, a little bit of a mixed picture when it comes to the stock markets there. We had seen a little bit of unwinding of some of those bets when it came to the semiconductor wagers around South Korea. Of course, we had seen an immense rally in that sector as well. Local stocks fell in the previous session, and we're seeing the Korean won under pressure with the U.S. dollar pushing higher. But really, Annabelle, what I'll be watching is also how South Korean assets react to what's happening in China as well, because, of course, the Korean won very much following what the Chinese yuan does, not only because of the third plenum that is happening this week, but because of that risk-off sentiment in Chinese assets, given the potential of a Trump return to the White House.
Yeah, it really relates to that concern around high tariffs. And of course, you mentioned the third plenum that's kicking into gear today. We'll also have all of that economic data coming out, the monthly figures plus second quarter GDP. This is the state of play, though, for Aussie assets that are coming online this morning. So you're seeing actually stocks that are moving high here. We have seen, as you said, that dollar strength coming through in the Aussie, just fractionally weaker. What else we're tracking, of course, are how US assets are faring this morning, not just the dollar story, but also any potential moves that we see around treasuries. Cash treasuries are closed today for a public holiday, or given the public holiday in Japan. But still, we have seen the futures indicating that yields will rise when cash trading starts in the London hours instead. Given that we said the aftermath has increased the odds of President, or rather Donald Trump becoming president again. It does play in, as you said, Sherry, to that support for looser fiscal policy and higher levies. But let's get more on the market reaction, bringing Garfield Reynolds, who leads the Markets Live Asia team. And Garfield, how do you view it? Because following what was considered quite a disastrous debate a couple of weeks back, we'd already seen the odds of Trump being elected being priced back in. How much further is there to go on that, even after the events of the weekend?
Well, some of that will depend on how the Republican National Convention plays out, the sort of impact that has. There's also one of the potential things that is occurring here is that what the reporting is showing from the Democrat side is that there's a significant lessening on the pressure on Joe Biden. So there's the potential that he is more likely to be Trump's opponent. So to some extent, if you read out of all that, a slight increase in Trump's odds of winning, a decrease in the odds that the Democrats end up with a chaotic situation as they move to replace their leader. That all makes it look like, from the market's point of view, the situation now is similar to the way it was a week and a half ago, only more firmly. So I think that means that we've had a modest move in the Trump trade direction, as flagged. The US dollar higher, especially against the Mexican peso, expectations that the yuan also will come under further pressure. Those sort of assets that are more directly impacted, by the potential for another Trump presidency, and in particular, the potential that Trump would also, that the Republicans would have strong gains in the House and Senate, and so that would increase the potency of a Trump presidency. But for developed market assets, for a lot of the major asset classes, this is just a small step further along a path that they had already been tracking.
We don't get cash trading in U.S. Treasuries, unfortunately, until the London session because Japan is away on holidays. But what does that mean for the yield curve, given all of what you just said? More potential trade tensions, looser fiscal policy, if we get another White House really dominated by President Trump?
Well, again, yields did respond to the debate, and those futures trading, that is signaling perhaps a little bit of upward pressure. Then again, Australian cash bonds are trading. They've moved in line with the Friday shift in US Treasuries, which was to see yields come down. And the fundamentals are pushing for lower yields. So even if the impact of the political occurrences in the US is a bias towards higher yields than there would otherwise have been, the very strong potential that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates in September and then cut several times in the coming months, that's going to bring yields down across the curve. It's also likely to create a curve steepening as two-year yields fall faster. So again, at the margin, it makes a difference. Slightly higher yields than we would otherwise have seen, perhaps a slightly higher curve. But for now, the picture is not hugely different for Treasuries than it was before the weekend.
Garfield Reynolds, who leads the Markets Live Asia team, with the market assessment of the potential Trump White House. We have more ahead. This is Bloomberg. Hi, Richard. This is Sherry in Tokyo. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, Sherry in Tokyo. I was just there a week ago.
How are you doing? What a crazy day to come on.
It is. I assume you're going to want to talk Fed and U.S. outlook.
Yeah, as expected.
Yeah, I did. I was in Tokyo, Seoul, and Taipei last week.